So, hello everyone to our third Creative Spark webinar. We're very delighted to have Fiona Whitehurst with us today. Before we get started, I'm just going to do the housekeeping again quickly, so you're all aware of everything. So that is the third webinar hosted as part of the Creative Spark Higher Education Enterprise Program from the British Council, hosted by Newcastle University and the Center for Analysis of Economic Reforms and Communication in Azerbaijan. So we had 2 webinars before, and we're going to host a total 8 webinars until the end of June. You should have received the list of webinars. If not, let me know. I'm happy to post them in the chat. So Creative Spark really runs across 7 countries, from Azerbaijan to the Ukraine and other places. And we've been doing it for the past 2 years, and we hope we can support enterprise activities in the region in the years to come. This session is being recorded. If you feel uncomfortable appearing in a video, you're welcome to switch off your video and just, have a photo or whatever being displayed. But once we go into the Q&A later on, it would be lovely if you ask the question if you could turn on your video so the speaker can see you. But if you feel uncomfortable, turn it off and ask the question in the chat. I'm happy to ask it for you. Please keep your microphones muted. And as mentioned, Fiona will present her topic, and then we will have a Q&A. You're welcome to post a question in the chat throughout her presentation, but also you can keep it for later on, okay, and ask them person. As always, there will be a quick survey at the end. So I will email it to all the participants here today. Please be so kind and fill it out and give us some feedback about how we can improve or what other topics you might want to like. All right, so without further ado, we have a really exciting presentation today by Dr. Fiona Whitehurst, who's been using Stanford University's D-School 5-stage design thinking model in the classroom. But because of COVID, she moved it online, and she will share a little bit about her experience of what works, how she's done it, what was challenging. And you can ask her any questions about how you might bring the design thinking model into the classroom. Fiona is currently a senior lecturer at Newcastle University Business School. She works a lot with small and medium enterprises in the region, and she's been supporting the Creative Spark program over the past couple of years. You might have met her in Baku when she was there recently, but if not, I have the pleasure to introduce her to you now. So without further ado, Fiona, please go ahead and share your PPT.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. I will do that. And thank you all for your time this morning, and to Andrea for that introduction. So hopefully you can see those slides. I think it was always a bit of a challenge when we were very early on into this Zoom routine, but hopefully we're all used to that now. So first of all, I'm just going to set a little context about where this exercise, where this workshop fits into my teaching, then give a really whistle-stop tour of design thinking before looking at how we use this workshop, this exercise, in the classroom first, in the physical classroom, and then how we moved it into an online version. And I'll talk a little bit about the challenges, not just the challenges of the online, but the challenges of both. So I use this workshop in a module that I teach, which is called Creativity, Theories and Applications. It's present on our Innovation, Creativity and Entrepreneurship Master's degree and on our Master's in Arts, Business and Creativity. So one of the topics we cover during this course, during this module, is creative organisations. And we take a very critical look at practices and processes that organisations use to try to increase the creativity of their employees. And this means we also look at the physical spaces that organisations create. So we've just got some pictures here. So you can see at far left, you can see that's Google. So we look at some of the novel practices that go on within the Googleplex complexes. I don't know if anybody wants to put in the chat or unmute themselves to think about which organisation these middle workplaces might belong to. I'll come back to the slides as well. But actually, these, I don't know if you can see in detail on the rear middle photograph, there are actually lots of Lego models in those shelves. So these are actually Lego's offices. So they want everybody to be able to sort of play with the models. I'm still not sure how many people will actually come down the slide, but hey ho. And also one of the other things that we would have done pre-pandemic, we would be able to take students, we usually have anywhere between 30 and 60 students on this module, and we try and take them to local creative companies. And this is the view, or the far right picture is the view of our gorgeous Tyne Bridge in Newcastle upon Tyne, and this is the view from Zero Light's offices. So Zero Light are a company that's come out of the gaming industry, where they used to do car driving games, and they now create configurators for car brands, really luxury car brands, so that you can, if you're going to buy your Pagani or your Audi, you can configure it entirely to how you want it to before, so that you can see how your version will look. So sadly, we've not been able to take students out to Zero Light. But that's the context of the module in which we use this exercise. So having given you that quick context, I want to do a really whistle-stop tour through design thinking. Many of you will have come across the sort of Stanford University D-School Design School in the United States, their model. Ultimately, at the heart of design thinking is understanding the needs of your user. So really human-centered design. Stanford have this 5-stage model. You empathize, you gain a really empathetic understanding of the problem you're trying to solve for your human user. And that's typically through extensive user research. You define your problem, or you create your problem statement by analysing your user research to define the core problems those users are facing, and you usually create personas of the to really keep your person, the person that you're trying to solve the problem for in mind. So you create these personas. I'll talk a little bit more about those later. Then you go into ideation. So we all know there are lots of different ways of ideating, so brainstorming, brainwriting, all sorts of different techniques that in our module we will have talked about earlier on in the program. So you're creating lots of different ideas. You then, which is really important, you then rapidly prototype your idea so that you've got something sort of more physical, more 3D to show to your users so they can engage with it. And that 5th stage is the testing of the prototypes. So that's a very sort of long process. So the process that we use comes from colleagues who came to visit, when you could travel, came to visit from University of Technology in Sydney. So they used a version of Stanford's model. They were looking to solve big urban problems. That was part of their remit, this group of individuals. So what they would do, they'd taken a big space, a big old warehouse space down in downtown Sydney, and what they wanted to do, they wanted to invite people into that space to engage with them on solving big urban design challenges, but they couldn't have this huge amount of time that you might need for a full design thinking exercise. So they'd created a rapid version of the process where you have 5 minutes. We allow students slightly longer, but 5 minutes for each stage. And this is the version that we then adapted. So the 5x5 workshop. Within our teaching, the task that we give the students, and I said usually between 30 and 60 students, is to design a workspace for a particular type of creative work that will support the creative endeavours of the people working in that environment. So in terms of the learning objectives that we want the students to gain from this process or from participating in this workshop, we want them to learn a little bit about design thinking. We want them to have this quick version of a design thinking process sort of in their creative toolkit for when they are looking, when they're in employment, when they might be running their own businesses. Our students come from a huge diversity of backgrounds. Whilst I teach in the business school, very few of, or only a small proportion of these students come from business disciplines. They come from, we've got biomedical sciences people, software engineers, fine artists, dancers, all sorts of people, and that will become clearer when I show you some of the pictures from the earlier versions, the classroom versions. So yeah, we want them to have this technique in their toolkit, but also we want them to think very critically about what really supports creative endeavours. So again, we will have given them lots of reading about different case studies of different organisations, work that critiques the physical, the sort of the focus on the physical premises. Focuses much more on, well, what practices do you need to be encouraging? What processes do you need to be encouraging within whatever space that you have? We also look at some really sort of critical work that says that creative workers are often exploited. So in a way, if you try and make this workspace like home, you are just encouraging a very sort of presenteeism culture. So there are critical sides of things, and they do this exercise probably before they've really got into that critical literature. But we think that this gives them something to reflect on, to see what they thought was relevant. So so things like, does a slide really increase creativity? There are so many creative workspaces, you see the slides. It would be really lovely to do an ethnographic study and sit and watch how many people actually come down the slides. But anyway, so in the classroom, in any format, this is a rapid fire process. In the classroom, it's chaotic, it's noisy. We're running this workshop a couple of months into the course, so people have already got their established friendship groups. So those days when you go in the classroom and you can see that everybody's sitting at a particular table. So the first thing we do is we mix them up. So we just want different people to be working with each other. And so we usually in the classroom would have 6 or 7 people in each group. We give them a bag of materials. I'll show you some of the materials, but it's kind of Play-Doh, little molding plasticine things that kids use, cotton wool, tinfoil, sticky tape, lots of marker pens, and 2 sheets of flip chart paper. So we slightly swap round the stages from the original Stanford model. But the problem statement, we're looking for them to think about what sort of work is going on within this environment. So which of their disciplines are they wanting to create this environment for? We get them to empathize, we get them to create a persona, they can draw the representations, and we're asking them to keep that person in mind. Again, all the time, they've got 5 minutes for each one. We've got timers ticking down and so on in the classroom. Ideation stage, they start to look at, okay, they've got lots of ideas, but what's really worth developing? And then they go into the rapid prototyping, because we think this is a different type of thinking. You're moving from your mental thoughts up here to really thinking with your hands. Then in terms of the testing, we actually get them to sort of pitch their ideas to the rest of the class. So that's our sort of that's the outline for the classroom version and really for the online version as well. So in the physical classroom, so we have Sophie. She's a story writer. She's got little glasses perched on her nose, she's got ringlets. You can tell that it's cold in Newcastle in November, because while she's wearing her crop trousers, she's got a hoodie on, and she's got her hands in a hoodie. She's got a thick socks and a sensible shoes for walking around Newcastle. Then you can see in this middle picture, or I hope you can see, group 6 have started to get their ideas together. So this group 6 were a really sort of organised group. So you can see they've got their little persona on the post-it note. You can't really see what it is, but that's the persona on the post-it note. Then they've got their ideation. They needed rest space, nap beds. There's a lot of sleeping going on in this year, I noticed. I think this is a couple of years back. They wanted a meditation room, an exercise room, some green area. They wanted art multimedia studio. They definitely wanted the tech support available. And they wanted networking space, refreshment spaces. They wanted to, they wanted meeting rooms where you could break out. They wanted a playground, and they wanted daycare. So I was really pleased to see that this group was very inclusive. And actually, some of the students on this cohort did have children. So that's theirs. This one's a bit harder for you to see. Apologies for this picture. But the problem statement, which is in that sort of section partitioned off with post-it notes and walls. Their creative worker was exhausted, they were unbalanced, they were stressed. So their work environment, they designed it that they had a relaxing and distracting area. They had a movement area, though that movement area also had a hammock where one of the creative workers was sleeping, which you can't really see on that image. They wanted a refreshment area. Very pleased that they specifically wanted a tea area. So that was always important in my mind. But you could get snacks on demand. And then they also had a frustration release room where you could go and punch sort of punching bags, not individuals. You could smash things up and things. So that was their frustration release room. So for their exhausted, unbalanced, and stressed creative worker. So that's the sort of thing. And again, you can see on that far right slide, you can see the sort of the red moulding clay, the Play-Doh that I was talking about. They've got the rolls of sticky tape. They've got the sort of the tin foil and things. So we then come, actually, to be fair, that one's already, you can see people are looking around, people are standing around. That's already moved on to the pitching stage, but these are some of the other pictures. So you've got this one on the far left. They've got this tree. They've got again, they're looking at very much outside areas. So that I love this. They've got oh yes, we also give them plastic straws. Now, I know plastic straws are really, really bad for the environment, and these ones are already, we didn't buy them, these are the ones we're using up, just say that. But they've used the plastic straws to create a thought pipeline. And they're all looking into this sort of open space, and it has this tree and lots of relaxation area. So that's their one. This one, I was quite impressed, this middle one, with the way they've managed to actually use the straws and the plasticine, or it's not plasticine, Play-Doh. They've got green Play-Doh, and they've created this real dome, and they've got different areas you can see by the sort of things that are hanging down. And you can see the cotton wool. They've got, it's hard to see, but they've got little trees. They've tried to colour the cotton wool to be little fluffy trees. And then this far one, this was designed actually by some people who'd come from a fashion design perspective, but they also had a dancer in their group. So they've got lots of natural light. They've got this big wall area made out of tinfoil, which is natural light. They've got big speakers. They've got a performance area. They've got mannequins so that people can, design their clothes. They're very sustainable. So they've also got, I don't know if you can see in this far corner, here, very far corner there, they've got a donation point so people can donate their previous used clothes. So you get sort of all sorts of ideas, and it's just a really, really fun thing to do. So when we're coming to the pandemic and we are, went on too many slides. I've titled this slide Moving Online. Now, at the time when we were planning this, we didn't necessarily know whether we were going to be entirely moving online. There was a suggestion that we would be doing some present in-person teaching. So, but it would be very restricted. There was no way that we were going to be able to allow people to handle different materials that they were sharing. So I thought, well, okay, even if we're going to do this in the classroom, I need to think differently. So inspired by Lego Serious Play that some of you may have come across, I ordered lots of packs of Lego. So this is going to be a bit noisy, but I ordered lots of these packs of Lego. About 300 of them. So there's obviously a logistics issue there in finance, and but I got approval to have the budget for that, and students could either collect them if they were in Newcastle, or we had students elsewhere in the country, had students all over the world, so we posted them out, and then we set up a Zoom session, obviously also needing to take into account lots of people on very different time zones. So all inspired by Lego Serious Play. Now, we're just trying to, we did a couple of warm-up exercises because we really felt we needed to get across what some of the key rules are in Lego Serious Play. So each brick absolutely is what the owner of that brick says it is. So if I have this little brick and I tell you that's a golden retriever puppy, not that I'm yearning for a golden retriever puppy, but that is a golden retriever puppy. So that's, getting them just into some of the basic rules and just getting them used to playing with Lego. I can't believe that anybody has never played with Lego, but I have found people who haven't played with Lego. So we just get them to, first exercise, they just take 10 bricks, give them 60 seconds, build a house, and then they share the house. So I will show you later on, if we've got time, a little bit of one of the houses that somebody built. So then the second warm-up exercise we did, again, they're all still in the Zoom room, all sort of hopefully cameras on and building away. So we asked them to think about what their main challenges were right now. Said we'd got students from all over the world, different countries had unlocked to a much larger extent than certainly we were in the UK. But it was still, what were people's challenges just now? And that was because we were starting to try to get the students thinking about human-centered design. What were their fellow students fellow creatives, because a lot of them are creatives in either in engineering or arts senses. So what were their main challenges just now? We asked them to find their minifigure. So these were their, you see that? These were their minifigures. We asked them to add it to their house. We asked them to embellish it. I embellished mine by putting a little pink hat on it. And we then got them to have 3 minutes to think about that, and then we asked them to give feedback. So during that feedback, as they're explaining it, because they're showing their houses and their figures on screen, so they can point to different bits, and they're talking about what their challenges are, what they think, mainly what their challenges were. So then again, the 5x5 task. So the specific task we set was, how do you create a workplace for creative endeavours in pandemic times? So again, just mentioned, we were trying to get them to think about user research. It's never easy in such a short period of time, but I think it worked well to try to get that real insight from some of the challenges they'd heard previously, and defining the core problems that they'd identified, to create this problem statement. I think that worked well. The creating the persona for the user didn't work so well. We'd given them the instructions, you can use your Lego figure, you can draw, you can use Zoom whiteboard. I don't know if anybody else has found, I didn't find that anybody used a Zoom whiteboard really in my sessions at all, and I didn't really like using the Zoom whiteboards. Or you could someone could have a piece of paper and you could draw it, but it was much harder to share those personas. I just didn't feel they kind of got that aspect so much. Ideation. Now, we'd also said we'd already given them some ideas for ideation other than brainstorming, which we'd already told them has some real limitations. So we were suggesting they could do that. They're in breakout rooms by now. They're in smaller groups. They're in 3 to 4 people. We had smaller cohorts, a smaller cohort, but also I think when you're around a table, one end of the table can be working on something and the other end of the table can be working on something else. When you're in a Zoom breakout room, you can't really do that. So we kept the groups smaller. So we said to them, you can do brainwriting in the chat function, you can use the whiteboard, or you can just shout out and one person captures. So that was okay. I think it was mainly shouting out and one person captured. But again, it's difficult because you can't see what's going on in the breakout rooms. The prototyping was really the hardest thing that they had to do, because obviously normally you would, even in Lego Serious Play, you would probably be coming together as a group and taking bits of your model and adding it onto other people's models and things like that. But obviously they could only really instruct one person to try to construct the prototype. The testing and the pitching was still fun, and it was certainly easier than moving everyone round the room in normal times in a classroom, because then it's really, really noisy. You're trying to maneuver about 50 people around these tables, and as you can see, some of the structures are quite fragile. So that's always quite a challenge in the physical classroom. So just to give you some of the results, and just to make sure that we've got plenty of time for questions. This was one of our students, Sharon. She was in Newcastle. She was on her own in Newcastle, and she's originally from Kenya. So she created a house that would fly her to the sun. She was obviously missing the sun. And they said, you can be as imaginative as you like and convey this in Lego. So and other houses, there were lots of people who were, they were saying they're craving the outdoors, craving the outside, that kind of thing. So one of the things I would have done differently I would have probably taken more screenshots as we were going through the exercise, because what I asked the students to do was to take photos and then upload to a discussion board. That was one of the discussion boards that worked less well. On the whole, our module had very active discussion boards, but this one didn't work quite so well, maybe because they just, I don't know why that didn't happen, or maybe I could have made the instructions clearer. So that was one of the houses. And then this is one of the, this is again, this is actually the post from the discussion board. So this is one where the team did work together, and it was Fatam who'd actually built the prototype. So this was the overall display. So you can see again, they've got I don't know if you can read from here, but you know that they've got the plants, they wanted their fresh air, and they wanted their greenery and a balcony, because you weren't necessarily allowed to go out of your building. So there was very much notion that you would have your balconies. They obviously had the computers, they had the bookshelves, the open area. Still wanting, definitely, it was obvious to get back to sharing, collaborating, because I think this was one of the things they were realizing was a real challenge. It was quite interesting, really getting some insights into the challenges they felt about working creative, working in a creative environment, and also I think particularly them being concerned about how they would get to know people in their next employment. So if you're working from home, how do you get onboarded into a new organisation, things like that. So that, you're dealing with, whilst it's quite fun exercise, you're dealing with some quite difficult issues for them, but still, even though they wanted shared times, they also they had this space over here past that orange brick wall, where that was going to more the isolated meeting room, so they could have some peace. Fatim's also then, she's got this longer desk which allows for social distancing, but it's still got your soft lamps, you've got your lighting, and she's saying where users are able to have their work done, so do their work in a satisfying vibe. So on reflection, we probably did still meet the learning objectives, which were, sorry, I just have to have a sip of my tea, which were to get students used to using the sort of design thinking, that 5-stage process in a very sort of 5 by 5 minutes on each session. I think we did give them a little bit longer. So we got them to use that technique, maybe introduce them to a little bit to Lego Serious Play, which I think it's a separate but really interesting methodology. It was still fun. Logistically, it definitely needed some support, not least financially, because I can't remember. I think I think the Lego was a few £100 in itself, but then when we were couriering it around the world, that added on a lot of expense, but it was felt worthwhile because obviously the students weren't getting we were trying to replicate the students' experience as much as possible, so we knew that would need investment. Overall, it kind of lacked the buzz, the chaos, the noise, the laughter, the copying. You could always see people trying to protect their prototypes and things in the classroom, whereas you have much more privacy in the breakout rooms. And I think I didn't feel as engaged because I couldn't walk around the break. I could have dropped into the breakout rooms, but I tended to find dropping into breakout rooms was quite intrusive because you suddenly appear. It lacked all of that. But I think it was genuinely the best we could have done in a pandemic world. And in a way, probably, okay, we're not going to ask for the students to give the Lego back, the ones that we distributed, but I couldn't buy it in less than, I can't remember, it was 300 pieces box. I've got in the business school, I've got lots of bags of Lego still. And so because I've still got that Lego, I would probably continue to use the Lego for this process, for a couple of reasons. There's less clearing up. It used to look like a bomb had hit the, sorry, that's not really a very nice metaphor, but it used to look like all chaos had been let loose when we came to trying to clear the room up. We'd got particularly bits of Play-Doh mashed into the carpet. We weren't very popular with the cleaners. So we had to do a lot of clearing up. There's also a lot of waste. So, you know, in terms of sustainability, that's maybe not ideal. So I probably would continue to use the Lego, but I'd be glad to get back to delivering this in person, hopefully in the fairly near future. So thank you for your attention. That's my email address, and I shall stop sharing and see if there are any questions.
Great, so we open up the floor for questions. Thank you, Fiona. So if you have a question, you're welcome to either post it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask the question in person. So anyone want to have a question? Any burning questions? Chris, you unmuted yourself. You're ready to go.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Fiona. That was very interesting. So yeah, I've got a couple of questions. So just a little bit of background. I taught a design thinking course once in my previous institution. They also, you know, took it from Stanford, but it was more for entrepreneurship. So what I understood from your presentation, your range of students is quite broad.
Yeah.
And it's more about creativity. And I guess you chose, did you say the designing the office space because that's something they could all achieve? Would that be right?
I think it was more that was something that we were also covering within the syllabus. So it wasn't a whole design thinking course. It was something that was in the syllabus. So it was something that they could think about as in terms of if they were going to be self-employed, how they might want their own working space to be. Others would be going into employment. So it was thinking about what kind of environment would they want to work. And then it was also that critical thing, you know, in terms of assessing, do these you know, the sort of wacky workspaces work without the accompanying management practices to encourage creativity. So I'd be interested to hear more about how you use it in an entrepreneurship course. And I know that obviously our colleagues across at Northumbria do much more and a much more expertise because they're all trained designers. I should say I'm not a trained designer. My colleague who delivers this with me isn't either. So we're kind of borrowing that a very quick version of that technique.
Right. So when you say trained designer, are these people who are trained in the Stanford model?
I don't know. I know that colleagues in Northumbria are trained designers. I don't know if they specific, you know, they're very experienced across there.
Right.
In their design school, but I don't know their specific training backgrounds.
I'll just ask one more question and I'll let other people in. When you said about the groups, it was interesting because maybe just the case where you're teaching a physical group, you said you would go in there and they would be sitting in the friendship groups, the students, and then you would mix them up. I just wondered what the rationale was for that, because it could be rationale to say leave people in the friendship groups because they know each other already.
Yeah, we do various different things on this course overall. We do various things in other modules where they very much are, one of the other modules is a sort of new venture creation module, so taught by my colleague Lee Sear, and they're very much allowed to form their own groups. With this particular module, one of the other things that we are trying to, as well as sort of, you know, the creative organisations, one of the things that we are trying to get them to learn about and experience is working in multidisciplinary, multicultural teams. So that's the sort of the rationale, is to mix them up so that they have different ideas And again, you know, we give them all of the material around the challenges of working in multicultural teams, but we also like to give them that experience of working in those diverse teams. We also put them into those teams for their diverse teams, not the same ones necessarily as we used for this exercise. We put them into very diverse teams for their assessment, which is always interesting. And then we get them to reflect on their experiences of working in a diverse creative team for a bit of their assessment.
Okay, right. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
Other questions or comments, or maybe also you might want to share your own experience if you have?
Maybe thank you for the possibility, and it's always good to learn from others how you manage your design thinking classroom. I was thinking this, how the timing inside your course, because you mentioned that it's not at the beginning, and also mentioned that they get the literature after, so they can make reflections. So that's one of my questions.
Yeah, I think what we trying to remember which way the syllabus kind of runs. So because it's a very broad module, and we are trying to sort of cover, it's quite an unusual model in that we actually look to cover creativity, sort of theories of creativity. So we give them a broad view of the different types of creativity theories, the different ways that creativity is explained. We feel that all the time we're needing to build them up to start their creative project, which is the basis of their assessment. So we feel that we also need to give them some creative process sort of tools and techniques. We also need to introduce them to the creative teams literature, the cross-cultural literature, which is, you know, the creativity tends to be written about from a very non-diverse perspective, very sort of Western view. So there are all sorts of issues that have to be unpacked around that in terms of making them aware that there's much broader creativity than, you know, your standard sort of Western, particularly American creativity. So again, we've got all sorts of exercises we get them to do around that. So we get them to give a quote from somebody who they think is creative, and then we sort of I analyze those and sort of show them that most of them are American, most of them are male, all of that kind of thing. Doesn't always happen, but so it just feels it's quite a condensed module because it's 20 UK credits, so 10 ECTS credits within one semester, which is quite unusual for our programme. So it is quite condensed, but it is about November time that we're, I think this time it was December that we were doing this exercise. It's also quite nice when we're in the classroom because it's a lighter exercise to do. It's something that they sort of look forward to. So I think it's that we have to sort of cover that kind of material first. And then we're talking about, you know, this falls around when we're talking about management practices to encourage creativity. And we do other exercises. We did one this year where we asked students to find videos of workplaces that they would like to work in. And they posted those to a discussion board. We got them to vote on which ones they most wanted to see. And then we played those in class. On Zoom, and then the person whose video had been selected talked about why they would want to work there and so on. So yeah, it's a lovely module to teach, and this is just one little element of it.
Do you get any support from your university as a educator? So are there possibilities to develop your staff?
Yeah, so we, particularly with moving onto the online teaching, there were lots of workshops that were run with from our learning and teaching development service in terms of, how to manage larger groups online, ideas for, discussion boards. And also I'd always been very interested in online learning. So I felt, in a way that I was a bit privileged in that respect, because I had taken that interest. So I'd previously done an AACSB, the American Accrediting Board, well, International, AACSB International. I'd done one of their online teaching courses in person in Florida, which was lovely. Actually, it wasn't in Florida, it was in Boston. So you get all these times when you could still travel. So I'd done that. There are other groups within the university. There's one called Nutella, which is Newcastle University's technology enhanced learning advocates. So they do all sorts of workshops and things like that. So there had been things that had been going on with Newcastle University, but I think, and I know this is being recorded, I do think that we were probably behind the curve in terms of some other UK universities who already were running a lot of online programs. We certainly weren't running anything online within the business school until COVID hit.
Thank you.
And I think it's also, I think there were so many, and I would say this to everybody, and I'm sure people have made use of them, that there was a huge amount of online material very quickly mobilized. And I know that Andrea has already posted to the Creative Spark website some of the resources that came out from British Council, Azerbaijan. Also, Enterprise Educators UK very quickly assembled a whole series of material for taking work online. So I'll make sure that that's posted on the Creative Spark website as well, because I think we were all learning so quickly. It was a challenge, wasn't it?
Fiona, can I ask you a question in terms of when I was using the 5-stage design as well, like Chris, teaching actually entrepreneurship rather than creative thinking or innovation. The biggest challenge we had was the empathy stage. People are like, oh yeah, I know what they want. And and that's exactly not like taking your perspective and putting that on what other people might want in an office. So was there any way you facilitated that actually people try to emphasize with others, try to understand other perspective and bring that in?
Yeah, again, I think in the classroom version, again, it comes back to what I was saying, about mixing the groups. So you have got people, so as I said, the people who'd done the one where they had the performance room, there were dancers. There was a dancer and a choreographer in that group. There was a fashion designer in that group. So, okay, they're kind of a sample of one, but they were talking about their needs in terms of workspaces. So that might be slightly easier than trying to do it in an entrepreneurship case where you really do need to go out to do your user research. And again, I think it comes back to our origins with the sort of Stanford via UTS Sydney. The Sydney one was seeking users' views on urban problems. So they actually had people coming into their workspace who were people living in the city. So you'd already got that bit of user research. So again, I think it's really, really interesting, and it makes me think much more about it. But I think that was how we are able to use that quick fire thing where you don't need to do the in-depth, where you can't do the in-depth user research, because you are actually using their own experiences as users. And as I said, that fed through into the pandemic version, where we were talking about their own needs as students studying in a pandemic. But no, I really appreciate the question, all of the questions, because I think they're very perceptive questions.
And can I just ask the last question from my side? You said it's a 5 times 5 minute, right? It's very rapid. It's you know, zoom, zoom, zoom. And I'm just thinking, when we've done it, it was a day-long thing because we wanted them to really go beyond the initial assumptions and the initial ideas and dig a bit deeper. Now, beyond being a kind of refreshing exercise and, you know, a spark of creativity, do you really feel it made people think and it made people be critical about potential assumptions or being creative, or is it just, you know, a warm-up fun thing to do?
I think it's within the context of this course and the learning objectives of the overall module. I think it does get them to think about, you know, why would they necessarily want to work in a place that, okay, I keep on coming back to the slides, but, you know, in a place that has a slide. So it encourages them, I think, it sort of gives them the quick tool, but it does encourage their critical thinking, because then when we're coming to, it always depends quite how it runs within the year. This time, thinking back, we probably had covered more of the material than we would have normally done because of the time that we needed to get the Lego dispatched out to China and places like that, and Indonesia. So what we've done previously from the classroom, we've kind of gone back to, because we have the pictures, we've almost gone back to saying, you know, why did you have that space in your particular design? What was that useful for? So again, it's very difficult to sort of take it out of the actual context of the program, and it wouldn't necessarily work in such a short time in other contexts. But I think it does help them think critically about why they really want it, why they would want that space. What does, you know, having that rest space give? What does the quiet space give? So yeah, I think it is. And also they various times will have been to see Zero Lights offices beforehand or afterwards, and so again, it's just trying to kind of piece together the syllabus, really.
Okay, any last questions or comments, Chris?
Yes, yeah, thanks. I was just wondering if you could maybe just say a little bit about assessment. You kind of mentioned it a little bit there, but I just wondered really, because, you know, this process in students' perception could seem a bit subjective to them, you know. They may think they have a great idea and you may assess it a different way. I just wondered how you kind of got some objectivity into the assessment process.
Now, the assessment isn't based on what they produce in this workshop. Right. The assessment's a very loose assessment, and it's what we do with them is we say, go and produce in a multicultural, multidisciplinary team, go and produce something creative. It can be anything, and it's always don't do anything illegal, don't endanger yourself or others, and this time it obviously had to be, and respect all COVID rules, and they were all working remotely. So, and again, this thing about the objectivity, subjectivity, we specifically say that we don't assess their actual creative output, we assess the presentation of the creative output. So then you're assessing people's ability to actually present. It was really harsh because this year I was wary about how well they'd be able to do these group projects because they were all at a distance. And so I reduced the weighting to 10%. And actually they were stunning. The presentations they did were amazing. The way they edited stuff, honestly, it brought tears to my eyes. But so we give them a low weighting, normally 20%, this year 10% for the actual presentation, and then 60 they do a small piece of assessment first, and then the main is 60% is a reflection on how they felt about working in a multicultural team. So I absolutely agree, because it's very, very hard. Otherwise, we can't judge their creativity because, you know, we just can't. We're not sufficiently expert in their different things. So what we assess is, and the learning outcomes are very clearly stated, we assess their presentation skills and we assess their reflections, and you know, they have to back up their reflections with it's critical reflection, so they have to back up their reflections with literature that we've covered.
Right. Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, so being very off time, I would love to thank Fiona very much for her presentation. Give her a virtual clap. And before we finish, just a quick reminder, our next webinar is on Thursday, and it is with Dr. Matthew Gordon and Dr. Ian Morrell about the National Innovation Center for Rural Enterprises, really all about how to support rural innovation through co-working spaces or the clusters to innovation hubs. And they will share how the Center for Rural Enterprise does it, but also Ian will share a bit about his PhD thesis, where he really looked in depth into what works and doesn't work in supporting rural enterprises. So you're welcome to join us again on Thursday, same time. I sent you the link in the chat if you need to sign up. And otherwise, I will send out a quick survey link afterwards and would appreciate your feedback. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining. It's been, again, a real pleasure seeing everyone in Hungary and Azerbaijan and Tanzania, and I hope to see you again soon. So thank you again, Fiona, and goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.
Bye.